I'm going to show you how to make a sliding puzzle box using 3/16 inch plywood, 1/2 inch plywood, glue, and a couple of saws. Start by cutting the thinner plywood into about a 4-inch wide strip. Probably the hardest part of this project is cutting a slit straight down the center of the piece of plywood. I would recommend aligning the guide about 1/4 of the thickness of the piece of wood away from the blade, then just sliding it down the guide and hoping it lines up correctly. I ended up with about half the piece of wood actually being usable doing that. Next, lower the blade to about 1/4 of the thickness of the piece of wood and run it along the edge of the piece of wood on both sides. After removing any pieces of wood the saw missed, cut the board into 4-inch wide pieces. Next, cut the 3 middle pieces, which should be progressively smaller and have a tongue and slit on opposite sides. Now assemble the 3 sides of the box so that the middle pieces can slide past each other. You're going to cut off the bottom of 3 of the panels to make the bottom of the box level. Next, take the 2 sides with the largest and smallest middle panels and clamp them together so it's easy to cut them to the same width. For the next parts, adjust the blade height to about half the thickness of the piece of wood. All of these slits will need to be the width of the piece of wood you're using, so I would suggest making all your cuts and then sliding the guide over to extend the cuts you just made. You will see me wedging pieces of wood between the blade and the guide several times. This is because most of the cuts you need to make are based on the width of the pieces of board you already have. I know all this random cutting isn't very helpful, but you should be able to tell what size all the pieces need to be just by looking at the finished box. Next, cut your 1/2 inch thick board into square strips. Now cut these pieces the thickness of your thinner wood less than the length of the lid, which is the length of the sides of the box. Next, glue the box together the way it's shown here, and then assemble the box to make sure it dries correctly. After it dries, solve the box and slide the lid on so that it's flush with the side that already has 3 sides flush. Now mark on the lid where you're going to need to cut to allow the middle panels to slide down. After cutting it, make sure everything lines up correctly and the box works. Now glue tabs onto the 3 sliding panels and the lid. These should prevent someone from removing the panels, but not stop them from moving the panels the wrong way. The last step is to install the bottom of the box. You might want to try wearing out the panels more to make them easier to move.